Harrington here, Vice President for Oregon Fire Marshal Association. We're glad that you're with us today for this July Lunch and Learn. I'd like to introduce Larry Medina of the Department of the Oregon State Fire Marshal. He's going to be presenting high-piled combustible storage to us today. Again, appreciate everybody's participation, making this program a success for the state. And Larry, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. As Chief Worthing said, Larry Medina, State Fire Marshal's Office, and I'm glad to share a little bit of what we can fit in an hour presentation or an hour to sit together in a lunch and learn about high-piled combustible storage. Sometimes I like to share my personal experiences just so that we kind of develop some kind of awareness on where I'm coming from, but high-piled storage, high-piled combustible storage, to me was intimidating. I didn't run across it very often. It jumped all over the code, and it seemed to never come easy. Probably why we're covering this in a lunch and learn. I know it's a topic that a lot of people ask about and seek training and that kind of stuff. So this is my piece to give it some justice on sharing the knowledge from the code and with a little bit of anecdotal stories. But anyhow, I think it's important. I pay attention to stuff when I open up, specifically the high-piled storage chapter 32, found in the 2022 Oregon Fire Code, where it talks about providing guidance. And this is a key word, reasonable protection, because we can get pretty crazy as fire code officials sometimes, or not have enough knowledge. In the perfect world, we'd see something like that's in that picture, because that's a beautiful picture of high-piled storage. We got flues, we got traverse space, we have the protection, we have fire sprinkler system. It looks like we have smoke and heat and ventilation. Everything's marked out in full perfect. Probably not going to see that very often, but there's a good picture to illustrate that and what we're going to do. But I think it's important that we talk about what we're looking at. So high-piled storage, that's just one piece there. What is that, right? What's high mean? Who came up with that? But basically, covered in that first section or that little narrative at the beginning of the code, it talks about 12 feet. With my limited experience at first when I dealt with this, I basically said 12 feet over, then I had to get concerned. 12 feet under, he just kind of not walked away, but didn't knew I didn't have to get into chapter 32. But here's my little first experience, and I'm spending a lot of time on this slide, but that's all right, is that there's a piece that says 6 feet or for high hazard commodities. So 6 feet doesn't seem very high. It never sounded very high when I came across a situation where I had a commodity that was high hazard that required a limitation on that. And to share the specific one, it was had all the things that could lead to disaster for a fire inspector, a deputy fire marshal, fire code official. It was a high visibility project supported by city council, supported by economic development. They're doing a ribbon cutting and all that. When I looked at the set of plans to fire department final, in big red letters, bold letters, it said no storage above 6 feet. And that's because it was a dog collar or a dog pet supply distributor who imported nylon harnesses, nylon collars, nylon products from Vietnam. And that nylon fit under, if you're familiar with the table, it fit under plastics, group A. So anyhow, they built a beautiful 30 plus foot building, had racks up 20 plus feet, and it was hard for me to understand, hard for me to explain to everybody on what this meant. But anyway, I'll harp on that because it was important to me. So if you walk away with anything, is that it can't be, high-piled storage can't be simplified just to the 12 feet, yes or no. There's some cases, tires is another example, stuff like that. But anyhow, 32 will cover classes of commodities, and we'll get into this a little bit as we work through the presentation, and then what's required as far as fire and life safety features how they arrange the storage, if there's a requirement for smoke and heat venting, fire department access. A lot of times, these buildings, or we're finding buildings with high piled combustible storage, that it requires quite a response. So you'll have a full contingent of apparatus responding, and in most likely the larger a truck or aerial that's going to have to operate, and you'll need more space, plus gaining access to that. So to wrap all that piece up at the first slide, basically the chapter, it tries to define the potential fire severity, because these are high challenge fires. If you've ever seen any video, either with NIST or just an actual incident, these fires are a high challenge. Sometimes they require sprinkler protection, what's called in-rack sprinkler protection. Sometimes they don't. But just the nature of the storage, the height, as well as how it's stored, whether it's cardboard boxes, wood boxes, pallet, that type of thing, and it could surpass the whatever control measures are there. One thing that's important as we go through this is when you walk in, because typically our role is maintenance with these. We might work in conjunction at new construction with the building code official in the review of a high piled storage, combustible storage area, but make sure that we're operating the right chapter. So 32 does not cover miscellaneous combustible storage. We'd find that in section 315. So everybody's familiar with this. I think I know I get a lot of Amazon at my house, and I don't even have an Amazon account. But a lot of stuff has changed over the years of how we go about as far as retail, warehousing, and all that. But very large warehouses or distribution centers for operations such as Amazon. And just to add a little bit more fun to it, when you have what we call big box stores, we introduced the high-piled storage. The sales floor is typically the storage area, the high-piled combustible storage area, and then we introduced the public, which creates a different hazard, a higher hazard with that. But it's that basically what is happening in our environment, in the industry, the warehousing, how they're storing things, large distribution warehouses and the big box retailers. The next slide will show what I find this is a very good picture of a nicely arranged. So this is a moving facility or where you have storage. Sometimes we are, as a society, at least in the United States, we accumulate a lot of stuff, and it doesn't fit all in the garage and or where we have storage areas. So you'll find, in some cases, either through that moving process or even just temporary storage, where you'll see it in these type of arrangement. There's a couple of things. There's the commodity itself, what's inside that wood box, and then there's a hazard associated with how they're storing it, whether those boxes or whatever it has to be. Another thing, I think I do not have a picture of it, where through normal operation or kind of an increase in efficiencies, you'll find that a F occupancy, manufacturing will have an area of fabrication, for instance, and put things together, and that'll be shared by the storage space. And so that creates another element that we need to pay attention to that increases that hazard. So I want to kind of just share what I've seen. Typically, I was hoping to expand that picture a little bit more, but this is pretty common how you see things. This could be that this was just stock that came in right off the delivery truck. It could be their permanent storage, but I think that what I'm trying to display there is just some eye-opening things that I think that I would pay attention to. One is the stability of the storage. It's pretty high. You can see the weight for the larger boxes kind of weakening the storage, and a little bit of a housekeeping piece and or um, the boxes that look like they're compromised. But I think that I don't know everybody else's experience, but it's pretty common you see this. It would be great if we walked in the facility with those first three pictures, but this is probably more reality. So what we hope to cover today is defining high-piled combustible storage. And even in that, because although it says high-piled, we talked about that, the 6 foot when we are dealing with nylons, nylon plastics or high-hazard commodities, and then other commodities that the product or the commodity is not combustible, but how it's packaged, how it's stored is combustible, whether that's on a wood pellet, a nylon pellet, or a cardboard box, a wood box, that type of thing, which creates the challenge of the flammability of the storage arrangement, as well as the ability of a fire protection system to either control the fire or suppress it. But what we want to do is go through and make sure we understand the classifications and then how it's configured, whether it's going to be stored on the floor, whether it's going to be stored on racks, shelves, or the shelves open or the shelves closed, and a number of other arrangements. There's encapsulation. There's really a lot of stuff that you can get into. Plus, it covers a wide range of codes. You could bounce around from the fire code in Chapter 32 to maybe 13. It's definitely a structural code when they start, if they've been through a code review for new construction, but it can get go in a lot of areas. We'll be able to talk about those permitting requirements. I think it depends on jurisdictions, but I know that in Oregon, there is a permit required by PCD or the Building Codes Division to review and permit the storage and the fire protection for high-piled combustible storage. And then some strategies so that we can gain compliance. That's the bulk of our job as we walk in. We might not have been involved in the initial construction, or it might have changed from when it was originally put in, because these are very dynamic facilities in that a lot of things can happen. Stuff needs to move in and out. Sometimes it's based on seasonal stuff where they need to get a different product in or out. And so depending on what you walk into, it's going to be important that we have some way to get them to compliance and make it safe for everybody. So what is high-piled combustible storage? This is just the black and white, like I talked about earlier. In my brain, when I first my first experience with this, is it above 12 feet? And that was just yes or no. But then I have a little bit there in the parentheses, and it's like I need to pay attention to this class A or group A plastics. Tires was a no-brainer. That was pretty easy, but the storing of the pet supply. So basically, dog collars, harnesses with just the nylon that you'd find anywhere else. Which was a critical. It was basically the bulk of this one business operation, who spent millions of dollars on a very nice building and was limited to the 6 foot. There's a story to that. I'll cover it later as far as how we were able to get to that, talk about that strategy to get them through compliance. Once you get through all the pain of trying to explain it to the fire chief, the city manager, city council, that kind of thing. But anyhow, high-piled storage also includes rack storage, the shelf storage, and whether it can be in a bin box or it can be solid pile. And all those are words. Hopefully everybody's familiar with those. If anybody has any questions, if it goes in the chat, somebody needs to let me know so I can kind of explain that. But my experience with rack storage is sometimes you'll find that in the big box where you'll have a pallet right on a rack. And that's the way it's configured. It sets up. If I have a supply shop, I see this a lot in like Ferguson Plumbing, that kind of stuff. It can be on a shelf. That can be a shelf that's not mesh, but basically metal. It's not even. It could be a grate, but it's basically open, or it can be solid shelf, such as a sheet of plywood. Yeah, bin boxes. Recently, we had this where you have a retailer and they store basically in wood bins, and it's all in their storage warehouse. And this part of the code will cover that, where you have a solid box. So for me, I thought it was important to explain why do we have high-piled combustible storage. I think we know that the fire code is empirical, that basically stuff comes up. Either we've had incidents where the code didn't address the hazard adequately, and we had significant losses, especially losses to firefighters that may have gone into warehouses and had high challenge fire, or basically the fire environment led to even more hazardous situation that jeopardized the safety of the firefighters suppressing the fire. But anyhow, we've seen through the years that the customers, the people who operate warehouses, operate businesses, they want to maximize storage area, right? So in real estate is expensive. So if you can minimize the footprint and build this or accommodate higher storage, then you're basically making you could in effect just maximize that total storage and go up. Typically, those Amazon buildings, Home Depot, Costco, and even though there's nothing low cost, I have that word in there, so it says rapid construction. They go up relatively quick, so it can be a tilt up, concrete tilt up. It can be a metal building, but it's relatively, in the grand scope of things, a less cost than some other type of construction or other type of building that we might see out there as far as a commercial building. So that creates basically a need and a want. Who does not want their construction project to go up as quickly as possible and have a minimal cost, or minimize the cost with that? And the same thing applies in the slide. It says, where you want the warehouses. So we've seen there, like, why are they building a warehouse? It could be in the middle of nowhere, is what I say, but it might be along a great transportation route. But typically, if it's shipped from overseas, it'll come to a port. It may fly in, that gets loaded up, and then you'll see that transported out and gone through its distribution process for the customer. And basically, overall, high-piled combustible storage increases the efficiency of the business operations that need to store product. And that's, in the business world, that's really important. Is it so much our concern? Not really, but we do like to take care of the customer and make sure that we have the ability to accommodate this type of construction that the customer wants, and do it safely. With that, I spoke earlier about kind of the increased challenges associated if a fire were to occur in an area that has high-piled combustible storage. So you have the increased fuel load. So on the one hand, you have the advantages you can take of increasing your storage height, but then on the same footprint, you have a higher fuel load. Higher fuel load will equal more intense fire, more severe fire. It may compromise the structure. may compromise whatever it's being stored on. You could have you will have increased fire loss, basically, because you've maximized space, which if nothing happens, you're looking good. But the fire loss can be the fire losses that I've seen are very, very high. The important part as far as the fire and life safety, firefighter life safety issue is structural failure. That can be the building itself as far as a collapse, or the how it's stored. Either you can have high piled combustible storage that's stacked on the floor, and that can fail or fall on firefighters, or you can have rack storage that fails even though it's metal. Everybody knows that metal has a potential for failure when it's subjected to heat, and that storage can come down on there. And we do know there's a history of that, and that explains why we have a chapter 32 in some part. Sometimes what you have or what the customer has inside of the building, the product that they're storing is of more value than the building itself. So there's a lot of effort in putting preventing the occurrence of fire, of course, and then also the issue of how they go about suppressing the fire. But those all create challenges that are unique to high-piled combustible storage. There's also fire dangers, right? So fire dangers, part of that efficiency is when you want to mix the manufacturing process with the storage area, or you can have vertical. I don't know if they call it manufacturer. Basically, you're making, storing, and distributing out of the same facility. It's not going from one business entity to the other. When you have that mixed occupancy hazard, it can create some fire danger. Shipping receiving is a very busy area for one, but you have product that is being received, obviously, from either semi or however it's coming, and then it's the offloading and moving or staging to where those commodities are going to end up. So typically, with shipping and receiving, one busy area. Two, you can have it in an area where it's not its final place on a floor, or in the storage area. In some cases, you'll have a developer who will build the building with no specific tenant. That creates a challenge in that you don't really know who's going to go in there until they sign a lease and get a tenant there. And then the fire danger associated with that is basically, my experience at least has been that nobody builds the most intense restrictive requirements. It seems that they try to get in as low as they can, but then on the fire requirements or building requirements, and then end up finding a tenant that has a more intense operation or higher hazard. Then we had the introduction of high-piled combustible storage in retail areas. So these are the big box stores. These are Home Depot and Lowe's. It creates a different component because it's a warehouse and it's also the retail sales floor there. So, and nature of the occupants, it's different. You'll find in the table where it talks about open to the public or not open to the public. It's a different dynamic if you have staff employees that are working the storage operation versus occupants the public who enter in to make purchases that are stored in there. Real quick, as far as the scope of Chapter 32, it's actually really brief when it talks about it, but I think it's important to talk about what this is. So it has to meet the definition of high-piled combustible storage. The definition of high-piled combustible storage out of Chapter 2 is storage of combustible materials in closely packed piles, or combustible materials on pallets. Pellets can be wood, they can be metal, or non-combustible, and they can also be not plastic or a more hazardous material. They can be in racks or they can be in shelves, but the key point is the top of the storage, not the storage rack, not the shelf, not the rack itself, but the storage is in excess of 12 feet, top of storage. So in theory, I could have a rack system that's only 10 feet high, but once I put my storage up there, combustible storage, it'll be higher than the 2 feet. So I'm measuring from the finished floor to the top of the storage, and it's at the 12 feet. Then we'll drive this one home on the 6 feet. One is because I'm trying to save people the pain that I experienced in just trying to explain this. I wasn't very good at explaining it at the time, but I think everybody's familiar as far as plastics in general, that when they're exposed to heat, when they're exposed to fire, it completely changes the dynamic of that product. Basically, it'll turn into or burn just as hot and intense as flammable liquid. So that to mitigate that hazard, that's where top of storage is limited to 6 feet, which is confusing, or I found it confusing, where it doesn't seem high as far as the height of the storage, and it was hard to explain. I think rubber tires, everybody explains. If you think about here, we have a large distribution in Central Oregon. We have a large distribution area in Prineville with Les Schwab. And I don't know if there's any other Les Schwab distribution facilities. I imagine there might be, but tons and tons of tires, which creates their own challenges. Very intense fire protection systems, and a lot of engineering to make those facilities safe, or that storage area safe. In that, what you see on the slide where it says additionally, the scope reminds the user that there's 6 sections of the Oregon Fire Code that are referenced. So to just make it fun, we'll be in chapter 32, but if I'm dealing with some aerosols, that's going to send me to chapter 51. In Central Oregon, there was a manufacturer of it's not really pesticides, but what they have a business operation where they manufacture an attractant of pests, mainly for the almond industry in California. Anyhow, they have aerosols in that. And if you think about aerosols, I mean, it's like a can of hairspray, and it could be a can of spray paint. But basically, it's the uniqueness of containers under pressure, usually with a flammable liquid or some flammability characteristic. Flammable and combustible liquids in general is sending you to chapter 57. So in addition to 32, you're looking at 57 for flammable combustible liquids. Hazmat is in the hazmat chapter 50. Paper records. Paper records is very specific, happens a lot. I know that we live in the digital world, but we store a lot of paper in that. There's a section in NFPA 13 dedicated to the design and installation of automatic sprinkler systems for paper record storage. And if you think about this, these are like archives. These are like high value. It could be libraries. It could be museums, that type of thing. But basically, it's records that are of high value, or the potential, the loss of those records, paper records, would create a significant impact to that business or that operation. Combustible fibers are covered in chapter 37, and this is an important piece in the way it's included, but chapter 3. So it's important to realize that when you're operating in chapter 350 or chapter 3, section 315, and when you're not. I won't go through that, but that's an important piece. You might walk into a facility and see what looks like high-piled combustible storage, but then you start reading through and find that you're staying in chapter 3, section 315. So that's really an important piece. I wanted to highlight just that. I think that the definition, or at least how how they wanted to craft scope and applicability in the International Fire Code and how we adopted the Oregon Fire Code is that, hey, look out, we still have 6 other things that you may need to consider. So this is kind of like that lowest common denominator, just illustrating the scope and applicability, where when you get into the table, it doesn't say it in the body of the code. When you get into the table, if it's all the requirements, sprinklers, detection, access doors, smoke and heat removal, no limitations. There will be no limitations on pile dimension, height, or volume. If it's less than 500 square feet. So what it's saying is greater than 500 square feet. Now we got to pay attention. Now we're in chapter 32. So at 501 square feet, it may kick in a number of requirements typically based on the square footage as that increases and the commodity. So this applies to all, whether it's a warehouse that's our normal or traditionally where we saw high-piled combustible storage with the introduction of big box stores or find it in retail. And then the storage occupancies. Like I said, that's just a change in nature, I think, across the United States where we just have too much stuff. And we'll find the need to store it offsite and to meet that demand. There's some very creative and innovative and fancy storage facilities that will store people's stuff until whether it's if they're in transit, if they're moving, or if they're seasonal stuff that they're trying to not fill up their garage with in residential use. It does not cover the scope and applicability of Chapter 32. It doesn't cover the smaller storage arrangements or ones that are outdoors or in open air. There are requirements for outdoor storage, but we're not going to. I just wanted to make sure that we understand where 32 it applies and where it doesn't. So this is an important piece. I love when I have the ability to research and or have the opportunity to research and put together a presentation of learning things. So I want to say in the International Fire Code, it just directs you to the fire code on what happens. In the Oregon Structural Code, there's a section 435, and I really like how Oregon has, or the Structural Code has the Chapter 4 or Chapter 4, but Section 435 on stuff dealing with requirements based on occupancy and use. Anyhow, 435.1, it's the same language that you find in the fire code. So this is the structural code, and it clicks right through. I know that we've had some pieces that were eliminated from the fire code or eliminated from the state in the structural code. It reads about the same, and I'll note some other things that are different. It's actually on the next slide here. What's unique to the fire code that you will not find in the structural code, and it makes total sense of why it's not in the fire code, is in 3201.4, evacuation planning and fire safety is triggered when section 403. If we go back to emergency planning in chapter 4, it'll explain that. The next slide will kind of explain those requirements and when that kicks in, and then housekeeping and maintenance. This is where my experience has been, that I find the majority of my time when I'm inspecting or regulating or trying to find code compliance in an area with high-piled combustible storage is 3025, housekeeping and maintenance. That would be the perfect scenario would be on those earlier slides where everything was perfectly in, they had painted lines, they had their flues open, they had all that, or something that might need some work where you have some stability concerns of how they're of the storage arrangement. That little piece, so obviously the little flame icon is in the fire code, the little barn looking structures in the structural code. So section 413 covers combustible construction, and it just immediately sends you to section 435 for high-piled combustible storage. They arrange it, the structural code's arranged a little bit different. It's not a separate chapter. but just goes through that section there for that. So what what the fire code says is that if you it sends you back to 403, but it tells you what you have to do or what the triggers are. So it's kind of really straightforward in my brain as far as when you have to have an evacuation plan. And I think early on in my career, I just had no realization that an evacuation plan was required. But when you start looking at the requirements, if I have a high-piled storage area exceeding 500 square feet, that's a big, giant area, and it's going to be high challenge to get people out. But that's the first requirement or trigger for emergency planning and evacuation planning for high-piled combustible storage areas. And that applies to all the class 1 through 4 commodities, which we'll get through the table a little bit later. But anyhow, and then due to the increased hazard with high hazard commodities, that high-piled storage area is reduced to 300,000 square feet. It's more stringent for that 300 square foot area, which is a very large building. If it's in a group H, if it's in high hazard occupancy, it's going to have some type of emergency planning and evacuation plan. Manufacturing, if it's a group F, occupant load of 500 or more, or if you have additional stories, either subgrade or second story, third story, if you have 100 people above or below, it's going to require emergency evacuation planning. In retail, so if I have a high piled storage area in a group M, occupant load of 500 or more, or 100 people above or below, it's going to have additional requirements for emergency planning and evacuation. And like typical of most code, how we write it is we always want that option where the fire code official can use some discretion on whether there's going to be, even if it doesn't meet those first 5, there may be a hazard associated with that storage where fire code official makes a determination that an approved fire safety and evacuation plan is going to be required for that. As I said earlier, Section 3205 basically covers the pieces of the code. What I'm showing in the illustration isn't necessarily out of the code. It's just an illustration showing this perfect double row rack storage, and then also open storage below it. But in 3205, it lays out how we're going to maintain the original approved storage layout and stick to that plan. Talk about the rack structures. So rack structures, the challenges that I've seen with those is a lot of rack structures will go up without a permit. And it is a structure inside of the building that requires a permit and a lot of detailed pieces. Some telltale signs I've seen of a non-permitted rack structure is it's usually not affixed to the floor. And it doesn't have some of that. So oftentimes someone can purchase a rack secondhand at an auction and another business going out of business, and just piece it together like Legos or Tinker Toys, and call it good. When that will compromise the load of the storage, and then also compromise firefighter life safety when if it's subjected to fire. There's a limitation on ignition sources. Obviously, if there's some torches, welding, if they have some mixed use type thing going on, heaters, other type of open flames that we want to make sure that we're either separating by distance or shielding. Smoking, obviously, smoking inside of the building. We is associated with smoking. on there. And then maintaining the aisles. This is a huge one that I've seen where a lot of violations of maintaining that aisle, either storage placed there, equipment placed there, or things just happen to move over time and they're not able to maintain, or they are maintaining that aisle. You're making sure that whatever was originally approved as far as the aisle dimension and the height limitation is being maintained. In an ideal world, the owner of the building, the business operation will have all that for you. But usually, more often than not, you're having to go back to the building official or see if there's an archive plans that show what was originally approved. And then those storage heights. What's important is, or one good tool is to, if you have a sprinkler system, most likely you do, but if you go to the hydraulic kelp plate, it'll talk about storage. So it'll do the what it's designed as far as height and commodity and have the density there so that you can maintain that. I have run into situations where in new construction, they wanted to store above 12 feet. It was different from that when I talked about on the pet supply, nylon collars and harnesses. But basically built a building that could accommodate storage above 12 feet, and the system, the automatic sprinkler system, was designed to a lower hazard. So that one catches a lot of attention there, where there's a little bit of a disconnect in the plan review of whoever was looking at the sprinkler system and whoever was looking at the pieces for compliance on that, the structural requirements for the storage, the high-piled combustible storage. So it causes a lot of stress at the end of a project because that's where the fire code official comes in. But it's important that that's pieced together there. It takes a little bit of that. In that case, one strategy I used is we limited the height of storage until they were able to redesign the system and retrofit a compliant system. The array is really important, how it's laid out, and then maintaining flue spaces. Oftentimes you'll find storage pushed, occluding the flue space, and that's really important, or that really compromises how the system, fire protection system, is going to operate, and also how the heat and smoke is going to behave, basically, if an incident were to occur. The way some strategies to maintain that, sometimes they'll put a little bit of a block or a stop so they can't push the boxes all the way over or past that or into the flue space. And there's a number of other strategies there. Usually it's an awareness, because the person that might be loading up the racks is not the person who has the knowledge of how to maintain that high-piled combustible storage. Classifications. This one's really intense. Several pages in the fire code in the table on commodity classification. So it's important when I read that, when I read table 3203.8, where it says examples of commodity classifications. I think I put in here, maybe it's on another slide, and it's like a 25 or so. But the classifications are broken down in classes 1 through 4, and then group A, B, and C plastics. In a perfect world, we would just have all class 1, for instance, and go through. But anyhow, to give you just some idea, because it's important, I think, to explain it, but class 1s are usually non-combustible, and then they're in the regular, ordinary corrugated cartons, cardboard. Class 2 can be the same class 1 product, non-combustible, but they're in wood crates, boxes, or multiple thickness paperboard. So the really thick cardboard. What's important to note, or how I wrap my head around this piece, is that uh, the hazard is more associated with how it's, I call packaged, the crate, the wood crate, the box, or a really thick paperboard or cardboard, than what's there. So I think I have an illustration uh, in the program where it talks about I can have like non-combustible products, if you think of glass mason jars, and then they're packaged into a cardboard boxes. And the on the one hand, I would see that what's the fire risk of glass with a metal, the two-piece metal piece on like a mason jar? Well, it's minimal, right? But if I have it in something that'll burn, like the plastic, or not the plastic, but the cardboard, or I have several larger boxes put together and then I encapsulate them in visqueen or whatever it happens to be, or I put them in heavier cardboard, then I'm increasing that. I'm more concerned, or the risk is associated with how they're what they're storing it in. Class 3 commodities are what you'd find, for instance, wood, paper, natural fiber cloth. So kind of the ordinary combustibles that you'd find. Class 4 are Group A plastics in the ordinary, the corrugated cartons, the cardboard. But this is a piece that gets a little tricky when it talks about high hazard group A, B, and C. Those plastics are high hazard, and you'll limit that to so now you've moved out of class 1 through 4, and you're getting in the high hazard group, which has a very, very strict restrictive code requirements. You'd have to refer to the table 3203, but it's very interesting when you go through the table itself. I have it in front of me, but some are no-brainers. Say, for instance, if I have small arms ammunition cartoned off, I think most people are familiar with how that's cartoned, and that's a class 4 commodity or class 4 classification, and then you would go to the other table, which limits based on the square footage, the arrangement, in how high or how much you can do with that. It gets as specific as I thought this one was interesting. Shock absorbers, and obviously automotive, but it matters on what it is. When it goes to shock absorbers, metal dust cover, or with a plastic dust cover, you're going to be moving in either class 2 or a class 3 classification. So I found it interesting. I was new to the code, just basically some of the things that are listed in this. But anyhow, matters on your jurisdiction, but some fire code officials, if they're involved with the permitting process, are deep in table 3203.8, and some are not. But it's important to have familiarity with what this means. I would not advise that you're out in the field and you do a field review. It's best to involve it. If you have questions on the commodity, that we talk with the building official and make sure that we are maintaining that. Configuration, this is really important. We talked about rack, solid pile, palletized configurations, bin boxes, shelf storage. It all matters on what it is. Obviously, it's based on what the business operation is and how they want to go about putting things together. So obviously, type and height, the requirements will be different on what you have. So there's a very intense evaluation at the beginning in the permit process, and to make sure they nail all that down. But we live in a very dynamic world, and our job is to make sure that we're still there with the original approval, or if we know any changes. The permitting requirements, obviously, you can have an operational permit. depends on your jurisdiction, or the permitting requirements are the same in the structural code. So it has to be above that magic number of 500 square feet. You want to have in that plan the floor layout. That seems like a no-brainer. Storage heights and fire protection systems. I think, let me see. Yeah. This next slide, it's not noted just in the bullet point, but sprinklers per NFPA 13. So the experience that I was talking about with the pet supply, the nylon dog collars and harnesses. So we came in a building that could accommodate storage above 12 feet. It was Group A plastics, which limited to 6 feet. They originally, so we went back to the drawing board after everything settled down, the people being excited about it. Sprinkler contractor says, I don't have that section of NFPA 13, but it's important. There's a little note in there that says that for high-piled storage, that there is no protection design when the slope of the ceiling, I want to say exceeds 212. Maybe somebody else knows. But in Central Oregon, the slopes are relatively steeper to accommodate snow. And there's very, very rarely do you find a flat roof. So to just add on to all that fun we were having with the 6-foot restriction, they had to add a gridded ceiling that was flat to meet that design requirement. So part of fire protection is what we're going to do with all the smoke and heat that's generated. And so these fires are high challenge fires. They're very intense. They generate a lot of smoke, a lot of heat, and that has to be vented out before the building fails and compromises firefighter life safety. Hose travel distance. So these are big, wide, expansive area. And you'll have hose stations inside or a standpipe or something connected to the system there. You won't have a standpipe, I'm sorry, but you'll have a hose requirement on that NFPA 13 system. So generally, the aisle width has to be maintained at 44 inches. It can increase based on the fire protection features and a number of other things, but I like to stick with the 44, then I go through there. It's one way to just mitigate that. We'd like, in a perfect world, if something becomes involved in fire storage, high-piled combustible storage becomes involved in fire, then we'll basically try to isolate it and only lose the one rack or pile or whatever that storage area is. And then that was referring to that pile height of that slope of the ceiling, as well as the distance. So it goes back to the same thing. In a non-sprinkled building, I've to accommodate the 2 feet top of storage distance and clearance to the top of storage to the ceiling, and then also in a NFPA 13 protected building, the design of the system is dependent upon that full discharge out of the sprinkler head, and it can't be obstructed by the storage itself. Fire department access roads. The larger buildings may require additional access or requirements based on the apparatus that may be responding to that fire or a fire incident. These incidents require an intense response and a number of apparatus that may exceed what we would think would be normal at a site. So the bulk of what we're doing when we go in, you want to check, obviously, clear aisles, and then it has, I call it tidy, but basically some good housekeeping. These places are very busy. There's a lot going on. You can have a number of things going in. I didn't include in this one, but I meant to, on obviously pallets, right? So you'll find a lot of times you have pellets that are in use, the storage is on top of them. Then we have something called idle pellets. So idle pellets, it's real convenient. Just stack them right inside, maybe adjacent to the rack storage or pile storage. but there's a limitation on that. And they are very hazardous if I have an idle pallet, just an empty pallet stacked up, because they like to stack them up pretty high. And it could be why they're stored inside, could be security. Maybe somebody, they don't want people tampering with them. Maybe it's just part of the thing as far as reuse. But in Glenn's, I think it was 2 months ago, maybe three, on the Codes Corner in the Gated Y, we talked about the high risk with idle wood pellets and the requirements associated with that. So a lot of stuff with high-piled combustible storage isn't so much the commodity and how it's packaged, but the whole operation and what we're using and what we're doing inside there. So I'm seeing from a question as far as mixing. Yes, I think we have it covered here in an additional slide. It's pretty common. If I don't see it in the next piece, because we're just in operation in inspections, we'll go back to it. But labeling, obviously, it's not our job to go and determine what that product is. But there should be some type of information from the manufacturer, some information from the customer on what the commodity class is, and if it's on a label. I know the code uses annual inspections, but in some cases, if you have a operational permit and it expires in a year, that will trigger an annual inspection, or a periodic inspection is what I like to use. But it's real important. These are very dynamic, and you need to be, if you have high-piled storage, you need to be in these buildings on a regular basis to maintain it. So let's talk about, this is just a case study that I had put up, but let's talk about the mixed commodities. I swore that I had a slide on that, but anyway, typically you go through the section of the code. It's pretty intense, but if you look through the code, and it has that graph or two figures associated with mixed commodities, and then this, it's really not hard math, but based on the percentage. But if you get into 3203.9.1, classifying mixed commodities, I think I have on one of the slides, it talks about it's a very conservative approach, meaning that it's going to err on the side of safety. And if you have, for instance, some Class A products, it's going to move. It may move into, if it's just mixed based on the percentage, meaning that I might have a Class 1 commodity with a limited amount of Group A plastics, and it won't automatically move me into higher and more intense requirements. We could probably have a whole class just on evaluating commodities of Group A plastics there, but typically it's a great question, because you will see that more often than not where it's mixed. It would be so easy if everything was just the same commodity, and but hopefully that answers the question. Can you do it? Yes. How do you do it? It'd be a more intense evaluation of that, the mixing, and get to use the figure 3203.91 and 3203.92 with Class A, when you have Class A commodities or Class A plastics with that. Is there any additional questions, or did that answer then basically give you somewhat of an answer? I don't know if it was just a question of yes or no, can you do it? But and I'll look for it later in the chat. A little bit of a case study. So if I have a 100 by 200 square foot warehouse, right, and we have the Class A plastics, it's rack storage above 12. Great, thank you. Don't hesitate to reach out as well. I see that you got to figure it out. And then what what are the sprinkler rules? And we can just go through. There's no really, I don't like to operate where we're trying to stump the chump or any of that kind of stuff. But if I go through just really quick, I got square footage, so 100 by 200. We're talking about what? We know we're above 500 square feet. Everybody agree to that? So if I have group A plastics, so down now I know if I've gone at the table that I'm in high hazard, and it's at 20 feet. So sprinklers, if I go through, obviously, if it's we don't have this situation, but if we did, if it was 0 to 500 square feet of storage area of high hazard commodities such as Group A plastics, I don't have a sprinkler requirement. I don't have a detection requirement. I don't have a access store requirement. I don't have smoke and heat removal requirements. I can limit, or I do have a limit to pile dimension, but storage height and volume isn't addressed. But once I hit that trigger above 401, answer the question, open to the public, yes or no. In this case, we're just saying no. Then I know that I'm in, let's see. In this case, it doesn't really matter because my square footage is above 2,500 square feet, right? But anyway, sprinklers, I rarely see any storage in a high-piled combustible storage or a building that's built to accommodate that without sprinklers. You might have the wrong sprinkler design based on whether it's a spec building or just somebody made an error in that design. Fire detection is required. Obviously, when you look at the requirements, if it's open to the public, it's going to trigger some type of detection because you want that early warning to get the public out. Access stores. So when you're familiar with how Home Depot and how Costco is laid out, and they do a great job, I think, of hashing out the area. No parking in front of those doors. They have a hashed out area to lead occupants out into to the public way with a path that's marked. And it gives the fire department the opportunity to get in. And usually those are labeled where it'll say either by order of the fire marshal that these doors need to be unobstructed. And then in most cases, at least in the sections that say like 501 to 2,500 square feet, not open to the public, you're requiring smoke and heat removal. And that's a critical piece in these type of buildings. When you go into those big box stores, you'll look up and you'll see those smoke and heat removal systems. You can see fire curtains sometimes and that kind of stuff. So aisle width. If you get to that section of the code, if somebody can just put in the chat, what was that number I spoke to earlier? I think it said there was a number of dimensions generally. Yep. So 44 inches. So just shy of 4 feet there. And what's important, I think that I actually find they get pretty creative in the big box stores because there's a lot going on there, but it seems like in some cases it's just as challenging back in a warehouse that is not open to the public just because of how dynamic in the operation that has to happen. Any questions on just that brief little case study on a basic warehouse, Group A plastics? Not saying any, but if you do have anything, I'll look in the chat and get it there. So I think, let me just check time, a little bit over. To summarize, 32, we talked about that. Larry Medina's way of thinking early on in my code enforcement and fire code official experience was I didn't have to worry about it if it's under 12 feet. That's not right. 32 can kick in at 6 feet with Group A plastics, high hazard commodities. If not, I'm operating in Chapter 3 under 315. The classification of commodities, it has to happen properly. Sometimes the fire code officials, and we have the opportunity for additional training and a lot of high interest in that, and we can help out our fire code official if they aren't as familiar with it as they should. But if you don't have a good classification of commodities, you'll have trouble down the road maintaining it. And then the design layout to get to it. So for fire suppression and then protection. Sprinkler systems operate on the premise that you're getting water on the floor. So it's making it discharging out of the sprinkler head into that spray and spraying enough water or the water at a density and rate that's either going to control the fire or suppress it. If you have obstructions like storage, like the shelves, like encapsulated cardboard boxes, that kind of thing, that's going to affect, and that's where you'll see the introduction of some in-rack sprinklers. And then most importantly, where we'll find the majority of our time is maintaining that compliance as they're operating, making sure that their housekeeping is buttoned up, making sure that they're maintaining their flue spaces. We don't have storage that's being pushed back into the flue space, that the storage racks are protected, similar to the bollards or something in that illustration showed, like some steel guards, as well as maintaining aisle space. But that concludes what I had today. Was kind of, I think it all laid out, very brief. We can talk, I've seen presentations or been in presentations where they're a full day discussing this, but I did want to make sure that we know what 32 covers and what it doesn't cover, in additional requirements of 32 that you'll find there, where it sends you into different pieces of the code, like the aerosols, the flammable combustible liquids, and stuff of that nature. And then how important the classification of commodities is. We didn't get into the plan review because that's really intense and would exceed the time necessary or allowed in this training. Firefighter safety, it's a high-piled storage is very impactful to fire suppression operation. So it needs to be maintained and laid out. And then the key piece is our part of maintaining code compliance. I'd like to open it up for any kind of questions and anything. My email, I should have put it in. I can put it in the chat maybe, but feel free to give a call or have questions. I work with a great group, and both David and Glenn, my knowledge dwarfs their immense experience. And but it's fun. It's a fun environment. I think that we have the opportunity to help if you have something, a local issue, or to make some clarification on this, because one, it's not something that everybody gets into every day, and it triggers a lot of questions. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. If anything comes up, like I said, I'm completed this portion of the lunch and learn. I appreciate your attendance, taking the time out. And if you didn't walk away with anything, just know that what Chapter 32 is and what it is not, and pay attention to Group A plastics so you don't have to have that experience that I had, which is about 2 weeks of your life where it's really hard explaining if you don't know what you're talking about. All right, thank you. Have a great day.